What's up, Gearfest? This is Just Blaze, producer, engineer, DJ, songwriter, jack of all trades, master of none. But I get the job done. And today we're going to talk a little bit about my creative process, what I do, how I do it, specifically as it centers around my new single called We Win, featuring Kirk Franklin and Lil Baby. You know, one of the things that I get asked about the most is my creative process, and specifically the beginning. You know, where does it come from? How does it begin? You know, what's the collaborative process like with the artist? And the answer is there is no answer. Every situation is different. This music is energy, and the energy finds its way to its destination. So with this particular record, you know, it like I said, I made the idea, it sat, and I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, Sam over at Universal Republic. And he said, "Listen, you know, we're doing Space Jam. We'd love to have you involved. Can you send me some ideas and let's brainstorm?" So I sent him a bunch of stuff that I thought was you know, obvious and right on the nose. Sent him a couple of things that, you know, were a bit off the beaten path. And then I remembered when I read the briefing that one of the key things that they were looking for a specific scene was uplifting, something that just felt good, and they had a note, maybe even something gospel sounding would fit the bill. And as soon as I read the word gospel, I was like, got it. So on that note, let's get into a little bit of the song We Win by Kirk Franklin and Lil Baby.
Just Blaze. Yeah, you gotta be, and always. Come on. Every day be. Yes, sir. And right now, I wanna talk to you. I wanna talk to you. Let's go. Woo!
So yeah, I mean, that's the record. You know, it didn't sound 100% like this, you know, when I sent the idea out to Universal, but it was pretty close to this. I tend to produce, you know, or mix while I'm producing. I tend to do a lot of my arrangements while I'm producing because I'm visualizing the record in my head, even if I don't know what the record is yet. I'm just kind of, you know, figuring out what I would do if this were the record, or if this were to become a record, rather. So we brainstormed on ideas, you know, for a bunch of various artists. We knew we wanted it to be a collaboration. We wanted it to be a bit unexpected, you know, and, you know, we kind of just threw a bunch of names in the hat and started playing word Jenga or name Jenga. You know, what about this person with this person, this person with this person? Would this be shocking? Is this too expected? Is this, you know, has this combination been done too many times? You know, and we knew off the bat, once we decided that we were definitely going to go the gospel route, you know, Kirk made a lot of sense. Obviously, he's one of the biggest gospel artists in the world. You know, we had a feeling that my sound and his sound would be pretty complementary. And you know, he and I had never worked before, but I had a feeling that we would lock in pretty well. So we got on a Zoom call, you know, and played him the idea, you know, and he loved it, you know, and we decided to start working on it. So I'll play you a little bit of the demo that I originally sent Kirk. So I sent him that. Then there was a little bit more to it, but that was the basic idea. He got the loop and a couple of chops, and he immediately, like within a day or two, starts sending me back parts. So this session that was originally, I don't know, maybe 60 tracks of MIDI, now it becomes 70, then it becomes 80. Next thing he starts sending me audio bounces of his stuff, and we're editing each other's ideas. Now we're at 80 tracks, then we're at 90. I am a big fan of not turning anything into audio unless it's a vocal or something that somebody else sent me and I don't have the same setup or the same plugins. So having the Apollos on hand and having the Octo on hand definitely allowed me to, as you can see, keep all the stuff as MIDI and offload, a portion of the processing. Definitely was like huge in me being able to manage a session that was rapidly ballooning by the day, because the pace we were working at was like every other day. There's at least another 5 to 6 tracks, and we were working on this song over the course of 3 or 4 months. So you imagine you're getting a few tracks every couple of days. It got hectic. So the foundation of hip hop is the drum, obviously. They're the most important part of the record, and they're the foundation of hip hop because the drums dictate the rhythm. So they're the most important part of my process. They're not always the first part. Sometimes I'll start out with a musical idea. Sometimes I start with a sample chop, but then I have to work the drums around that, and they have to knock. But sometimes when I am just demoing an idea that I know I'm going to flesh out later and alter or whatever, I'll put down a basic drum track. So that's what I did with We Win. It started out with very basic drum programming. I tend to not quantize a lot. People ask me, how do I get my drums to swing the way that I do, and what my quantization, algorithm is, or like what's my preferences for quantization. For a lot, I don't quantize a lot. I might quantize the kick that falls on the 1, and the 3 or whatever, and everything else is kind of just freehand. I might quantize the snare that comes on the 2 and the 4, and then all the fills and everything that happened are all just live, or anything that happens in between, those beats is live, and I tweak things. I'm not a great drummer. I just kind of tweak things, as I go along. But I'll give you an example of what the demo drum sounded like when I first started. As you can see, they were a little thin, not super exciting, but they got the idea across. Some people will just program a kick, some people will program a snare, and then overdub a snare or put a snare on a separate track. Some people will draw their drums in, and there's nothing wrong with any of those techniques. But part of the reason why my drums swing and feel the way they do is because I'm doing them all at one time. Like I might be programming the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, and the open hi-hat all at once, so that's also part of the reason why things swing the way they do. And then I separate them afterwards and put them on separate tracks so I can treat them individually. But yeah, so here's what happens when I start to lay down the percussion. So now it sounds a little bit more lively. It's not the most perfectly timed drum program you've ever heard, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to feel good, not be perfect. And if you ever listen to a lot of old gospel records, the musicians are kind of all over the place. But if you listen to them, individually, but when it comes together, it feels good. That's part of what makes gospel feel the way that it does. So from there, it's just really just a matter of fine tuning. I've always believed that if you use good drum sounds, or if you create good drum sounds, you don't have to do a lot of post-processing afterward. So I'll be honest, I didn't have to do a ton with these drums. I just had to get them to sit the right way in the mix. So like, I grew up, I was an SSL kid. I own 2 SSLs. I own a 4000 G Plus, and I own an AWS. Every console is going to be a little bit different, right? The caps are different, the components are a little bit different. Every console has seen a little bit of wear and tear, so they all have their quirks. For mine specifically, as soon as I went to, when I first tried out the UAD SSL, and as soon as I went and did my usual boost at around 10 to 12K on a snare, as soon as I did that, the snare opened up and I was like, it responds just like mine. So that this is not to shade any other plugin manufacturer by far, because a lot of those other SSL emulations are great. This one just reminded me that much more of mine, specifically for the top end, so it became my go-to because of that. Going back to the drum programming. It felt good, but something still felt lacking to me. Something in the depth wasn't there. So I when that happens, I tend to either find loops or create loops. Let's check this out really quickly. What did I do with this? Right. So I found a drum loop, chopped up the kick and snare, and just kind of played a pattern that kind of complemented what I had programmed already. And that's this chop here. A lot more straightforward, a lot less intricate, a little bit more quantized. But when you take it and layer it against the other drums that I programmed, and I'll pop them in and out. So you see, with that, all of a sudden, there's a bit more depth. There's a bit more depth. There's a bit more of a swing, a constant swing. The tightness in the way that I programmed the kick and snare, or just programmed that drum loop and that drum chop, kind of tightens up the looseness of the naturally unquantized stuff. I hope that makes sense. It kind of just all of a sudden, something so subtle and minimal actually ended up gluing the drums together. So if you have 200 tracks, but it's like, it's intricately done, it's subtly done, and a bunch of those tracks are serving purposes that aren't necessarily layering, they're just complementary. So like if you look here, so these are all parts of the same chop from the Logic sampler. This one I needed to treat separately because it's the intro. So I need that to be EQ'd differently, a little bit louder, a little bit more boisterous, because that's where all the hype and the energy is going to come from. But then this is the same source right here. This is the main chop. And then there's other like little variations of things that happen. Like I think, is it here? This is yet another layer, but it's a complementary layer. If I pop this out, there's a hole in the sample, right? The reason that hole is there was because it was the way I had originally programmed the sample. The bass line was very repetitive. You know, it kept just repeating the same, the same two. It was the same 2-bar loop over and over. So I wanted to just give the bass line a lift. So I found another part of the record where the bass line played something different at that same section, and just added that in. See what I mean? So technically it's a layer, yes, but it's not totally altering and overpowering the record. So what you see, a lot of what you see here is all stuff that complements each other. Like if you go, I'll give you one more example, the pianos and organs. So when you listen to it, like I said, you'll see that there's, 8 or 9 tracks of pianos that you see regions for, but it doesn't sound like 9 pianos playing at once. And I guess that's my point, break things up as you need to based on your playing ability, what notes or what parts are doing what in the mix. But you can, just because you have 9 tracks of pianos doesn't mean you have to have 9 piano lines playing at once. At a certain point, you got to know when enough is enough, and I had to learn that lesson myself. So I took a bit of a slightly different approach with this. A, because it was just me by myself. B, because there were so many tracks. So I did a lot more group mixing than I normally do. Like my drums, like I normally do processing and EQ and everything on pretty much just about every channel. That's the anal retentive in me when it comes to engineering and production. In this particular instance, like obviously I treated all my drums separately, kick, snare, toms, crash, rides and whatnot. The samples I broke up to fill all the little different holes, but aside from the intro, I kind of just grouped them all, and I would just basically mix the group as opposed to mixing all the individual tracks within that group. And it actually ended up working out really well. Some like traditional engineers will probably look at my master fader and be like, this guy's insane. If you have to do a bunch of stuff to your master fader, you did something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I did something different. I relied a lot more on little tweaks to the master, more so than I normally would. Obviously, this is an insane amount of plugins, but not everyone is being used like full blown. It might be like I might just be doing a slight amount of maximizing with Ozone. I remember specifically when I used the Sony Oxford limiter, I actually only brought it up for the enhance feature. Like I didn't really do any actual limiting on it. With the Manley, I used it for a slight bump around 8K. So it's not like I've got 8 zillion EQ moves on every EQ, and whatnot. It's like, all right, I'm listening to this record. It needs a little bit in 8K. I don't want to, if I go to the first EQ that I used and change and make the 8K boost on that might affect the other things in the chain that come after that. So it's better for me to just take what I'm hearing that's wrong, add something onto it, tweak it, and and just have it be additive. And we have the technology to do it. There's no wrong way, there's no one way. It's just your way. Guys, I wish I had more time. As you can tell, I will literally talk about this stuff all day. It's what I live. It's what I breathe. I can nerd out on production and audio and just anything music, for hours at a time. But thank you for hanging out. Please stay tuned for more Gear Fest. I go by the name of Just Blaze. Shout out to Sweetwater. Shout out to UAD. Shout out to everyone who's watching. You could have been anywhere, but you were here with me. Salute and love.